Hello and welcome to this Car Pod.
I'm Kenan.
I'm Filippo.
And today we're going to talk about cars. Let's start with the news. Filippo, tell us about electric Fords.
Great. I'd be happy to. So Ford has a couple electric cars. Actually, they have just one electric car, the Ford Mustang Mach-E.
What about the Lightning? Remember the Lightning? What about the plug-in Focus electric? Okay,
All right.
Tell us the news story.
This is your news story.
It's everyone's news story.
Yeah.
Ford is canceled. They were going to make an electric three-row SUV, and they have announced that they are not going to do that anymore, and they're going to focus on hybrids. And I think the primary reason for this is that Ford planned to sell this many Mach-E's, and instead they've sold this many Mach-E's.
There are two interesting things here. One is that they currently offer no hybrids. They previously offered an Escape hybrid, and then for years after, a Ford Explorer hybrid. No longer offered. So they're going from 0 to some number. And they also, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, made a big announcement that they weren't going to sell any small cars because the market wanted SUVs. And now they've said on top of we're going to make more hybrids is we're going to focus on smaller EVs, period. Because they can't make the economics work on large ones.
Yeah, I find this whole thing to be a little odd for a few reasons. Those are some of them. I don't remember an Explorer hybrid, but I'll let you have it.
It was available. It's also still available, by the way, but only for police departments.
It's always been only for police cars. There was the Escape hybrid, and then there was also a Fusion hybrid, which was popular.
There was a Explorer hybrid. I promise it was available
for fleet use.
No,
use.
for private consumers like you and I.
You're going to get destroyed in the comments. The Aviator was.
Thank you very much.
You know what? I'm not going to continue this.
Also,
the point is
I hope you didn't say Navigator because it was the Aviator that was available, which may have been what you said. I couldn't tell.
I did say Aviator. Filippo, you're going to get destroyed in the comments.
I'm right.
We're starting off tough for you.
I'm right. And Kenan is yawning, literally yawning.
I know, because he's tired of hearing lies from you. He's been lied to too much. The point is this: Ford is getting out of the electric three-row SUV game. I find this to be so crazy because when people come to me and ask me for car advice, the only question they ever ask when it comes to three-row SUVs is, I want an electric one. What can I get? And my answer is, you have to get a Kia EV9. And they say, that is heinous. What do I do about that?
There's one other option. There's literally one other option. Yeah, that's it.
The Model X is $100,000. So
how is that true? How has nobody else come out with a three-row?
And now Ford was apparently planning to, and they're not going to. I find it odd that the economics of it don't work. A lot of electric cars are in segments that are not particularly desirable, if I'm being completely honest. Like the Macan will be like luxury little SUVs is good, but like the buyers, like the swath of buyers is like three-row kind of mid-sized family crossover.
All kind of dumb because the R1S is available, I think, with 3 rows. But
again, though, it's $100,000. Yeah. I assume that this Ford was going to be like a reason. Like the EV9 to me is really the only one that I recommend to people because it's the only like affordably priced one, essentially.
Yep.
Anyway,
it's wild. How can it work?
It doesn't surprise me that they want to bail on it because Mach-E sales have been poor. And I think that the market does seem to be kind of switching back to the desire for hybrids and plug-in hybrids.
I think that the hard part is, Mach-E sales have been poor. It's also, at this point, a relatively aged product. And Hyundai and Kia EV sales have been strong. Sure, with lower prices than I think they predicted, but they've been strong nevertheless. So it's a little surprising to me. I do imagine that a lot of people that are looking for three-row SUVs want to go on road trips with their family or think they will eventually go on a road trip with their family. And that makes range more of a concern. And maybe they can't make range work while having the 3 rows and like the battery size doesn't work out. But it's still just, you got to offer one if you want to have any chance.
I'm really surprised this segment never really popped up. And I do wonder if this is sort of the beginning of a turn in the electric car focus, which is like, you're not going to see this crazy rollout, like everybody's scrambling to roll out all these electric cars anymore. And I wonder if it's going to start to slow down a little bit. And you know what? If it slows down in favor of plug-in hybrids, I think that's fine. I think that plug-in hybrids still make sense for an enormous amount of people. Every time I do this cross-country drive, I remind myself how happy I am that I don't have an electric car. There are other things that maybe the automakers should have focused on before diving deep into electric. And maybe Ford is smart by deciding, hey, whatever money we've spent on this already, it's sunk cost, and we don't want to lose any more.
It's just kind of surprising that they aren't. Some of the American manufacturers have a history of putting out cheap, bad product, and to some extent, I'm glad that they're not doing that. But like, surely they could just throw it together and put the batteries already have, the
No,
motors
they
already have.
tried that, and I think they all went bankrupt.
Yeah.
I think I remember that story.
Point taken. Also, for what it's worth, there are a couple other 3.0 SU electric cars that are coming. The EX90, in theory, is actually coming out this fall, in theory.
But again, very expensive. I mean, what is an EX90?
The Jeep Wagoneer S, I think, is 3 rows. Although who knows?
But you get the point. Like EX90 starts at 80. Like the point remains that like
Whoa.
a huge swath of buyers buy Highlanders, Pilots, Explorer, Pathfinder, all of those cars, right? Like they are tremendously popular. Like and if you don't qualify for any of those, Traverse. And I think that it's unusual that
the Traverse was just redesigned. Don't forget.
I went to the launch of the Acadia in like 2013. And yikes. Anyway,
can I say one thing? And then we will, for Kenan's sake, get off the topic with 3.0 SUVs.
Please.
How is it? Okay, everybody keeps talking about, okay, we're going to shift our plans to not do as many EVs and do more hybrids. How is it that Honda doesn't have a hybrid Pilot? How is it that nobody except for Toyota has a hybrid SUV?
You know what I've learned about Honda?
makes no
Honda's kind of
sense.
smart in that like they just have about 4 core products: the Civic, the Accord, the Pilot, and the Odyssey, and the CR-V5. And they just kind of do that. And they have about 3 engines between them, if that. There's like 2. There's like a 3.5 liter V6 and a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Hey, there's
and
1.5
they
liter
just
4-cylinder.
kind of do that. And occasionally they'll do like this offshoot experiment like the S2000 or the Element. But usually it's based on one of the cars I just
Yeah.
mentioned. And usually
Always.
they only let it go for 1 generation. And then they come right back to the cars
Yeah.
they do. And so it's like, why don't they have a hybrid? Is it in the line? Is it in the line?
They do have a hybrid Accord and a hybrid CR-V and a hybrid Civic and the Insight, don't forget, for a little bit. The
Yeah.
3rd gen one. I just, like, how they keep, all the manufacturers saying, okay, we can't do electric cars. Okay, then do something else. Do something.
Well,
Something.
yeah. Well, Toyota has that hybrid Sienna.
Toyota's the only one that has kind of figured out, oh, wait, people actually want hybrids. And you've bought a hybrid SUV.
I
from them.
got one.
Yeah.
I have a hybrid Toyota. Yes.
Fun fact, and then we will actually get off this topic. One of the things that I noticed in Europe is, I was thinking the other day, like, okay, why isn't there a hybrid Outback or whatever? There is, of course, a Toyota Crown Signia, but nobody wants that.
Right.
In Europe, there is a hybrid set of like Foresters and Outbacks. Like, why? I just want to
there?
plug in hybrid, guys. Yeah, there's.
Yeah, I don't know. The U.S., it should be noted, the U.S. government has heavily incentivized automakers to go electric.
Yeah.
And maybe to the detriment of the citizenry and the actual desirability of the product and the automakers themselves. Like, if you really look at some of these incentives, the automakers maybe have done better reaping government incentives than they have actually selling vehicles. And in some cases, that's certainly true of the citizenry. Like people buying cars that they wouldn't have afforded otherwise or wouldn't have even considered otherwise, but there are these massive government incentives.
There are. But not
okay,
for Ford 3.0.
Speaking of this fact, Filippo, tell us about the layoffs.
Yeah, there have just been a flurry of layoffs across OEMs. GM announced earlier this week or last week that they were cutting 1,000 software development jobs, mostly at their Detroit center. A bunch of different Stellantis and Ford factories have either gone down a shift, like they've cut a shift because they don't need to produce the same number of cars, or they have done layoffs at those plants. Stellantis is in a really rough situation. There was news last week that the CEO was coming to the U.S. for 3 days to meet with dealers and their union groups and other management because they're all worried that they will have massive layoffs. It's a hard time to be a manufacturer because demand is just easing. And
yeah, things
they're
are
not
different.
prepared.
Things are slower. Life has changed a little bit. It's not like the days of yore when Kenan was buying Ferraris and we were throwing confetti in the air.
I'm just surprised a little bit by
Not at the same time.
their lack of preparation for this, which is always true, right? Like fundamentally large businesses overhire and then do layoffs and then overhire, then do layoffs, and it repeats itself.
Yeah, I think it's kind of normal, but it does show you the true reality of this business, which is that it has slowed down. I think that's definitely true, and we have to keep that in mind. We're going to start to see incentives on cars again. We're going to go back to 0%.
Oh, we have incentives on cars already. They're back.
Yeah, I know. Believe me, I know. Hey, go walk into a Chrysler dealer. Chrysler has like 975 days supply on every car. They got like 2009 models still sitting in the showroom. Like, yeah.
A couple weeks ago, I had to rent a car to go and drive because my car was having issues. And I walked into the car rental place, and I had like a mid-size sedan or something that booked. Said, "Do you want a Wrangler 4xe?" For some reason, we just had 24 4xe delivered. It's like, yep. I don't.
You took one.
I don't want one. No, but neither does anybody
What did you
else.
take?
And that's why I had a Chevy Malibu. It was
You didn't.
acceptable.
You had the option of a Malibu or a 4xe, and you took the Malibu.
If it was a
Yeah,
I drove 1,000 miles over the course of 2 days. I don't want to do that.
Kenan and I would drive 5,000 miles in a 4xe in a week before we got to a
I would have
Malibu.
done
Am I
it
right?
in a Grand Cherokee 4xe, but they only had the Wrangler. So they don't want
I
that.
would have done a great. Boo.
Before we move on, I'd like to take a minute to talk about today's sponsor, Factor. Factor makes my life easier with fresh, never frozen, chef-crafted meals that are ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Meaning with Factor, I always have time for a nutritious, great-tasting meal. Between my family, friends, cars, and Kenan, my life can get pretty busy, but Factor makes it easy to maintain a healthy diet while still enjoying my meals. Something you might not know about me is my love of food. It's one of the greatest joys in my life, right up there with the Carrera GT, or close anyway. Good meals are important to me, and with Factor, there are 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons that you can choose and discover every week. Factor makes your day delicious from breakfast to dessert with dietitian-approved meals that you can trust: filet mignon, shrimp, blackened salmon, and more. And there's no shopping, prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. Kickstart your meals, whether you're looking to help manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well-balanced meals. Factor has stuff that can probably fit your lifestyle too. Head to factormeals.com/cars50 and use code CARS50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code CARS50 at factormeals.com/cars50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active.
Okay, we're going to move on from news stories because there may be more news stories, but we don't know because we've pre-recorded this podcast because we are not around this week. But we will be back live next week. However, we have the greatest Talk Cars segment in the history of the Talk Cars segment. There's a lot of great things to discuss, and I want to start with the Ken Griffey Jr. retirement story. Are you aware of this?
No.
Okay, do you guys know who Ken Griffey Jr. is?
Yeah.
Ken Griffey Jr. was a baseball player, and he was incredibly popular throughout the 90s and early 2000s. And my favorite thing about Ken Griffey Jr., I love he was a beloved athlete. And my favorite thing about him is the way that he retired, which was the following. Ken Griffey Jr. had a 20-year career, 25-year career in Major League Baseball. It was incredibly long. He started playing baseball when he was
Stunningly
19.
long.
He was one of the all-time home run hitters, record hitters of all time.
The people of
And
Maryland love him.
adored, beloved player. And one day in 2005, he wakes up and decides, I'm out. I'm done. I don't want to play anymore. And so he gets into he's played baseball in Seattle, and he lived in Orlando, and he gets into his car. This is a real story. He gets into his car and he drives home from Seattle to Orlando without telling anybody, without announcing it, without making like a big, like last day at the stadium kind of thing. That was just it. He got in his car and drove for 3 days from Seattle to Orlando back home. Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. 2005, okay? Ken Griffey Jr., one of the all-time great baseball players, is driving home to Orlando. What does he do? I know the answer. What did he do the drive in?
Bentley Continental GT would have just come out.
Ooh, interesting. Kenan, do you have the correct answer?
Well, the Cayenne had just come out, right? So I would imagine it'd be
Cayenne
something
had
kind of cool
just
like
come out.
that. Yeah, I could see that.
The answer is an Infiniti QX56. Because that was Infinity's heyday, and that was a big old thing. You remember that 05 QX56 was a pretty good car. In 05, it was like legit. It was like an Escalade competitor.
So legit.
And it had just come out. And so
Look at
Ken
that.
Griffey Jr. gets into his QX56, which is now worth, somebody's driving this right now in like Little Rock, and it's worth $1,100 at a buy here, pay here lot, not knowing that it's Roland Griffey's retirement. And that is one of the great retirement stories in history. I'm out. And you just leave. That's what I'm going to do. When I'm done with you guys, I'm just going to be gone.
In what though? What are you going to drive off in?
QX56. I'm going to buy one on the site. If you ever see me buy a really low mileage QX56 on Cars and Bids, you'll know.
Look out. You know what's coming.
You'll drive the 2 miles from the office to your house and just.
Yeah, that's true. It wouldn't really have the experience. We've never sold a QX56. We got to get a QX56 in. Listen, if you have a QX56 that's in nice shape and you want to sell it, please sell it on Cars and Bids. It would be meaningful to the team.
Can I ask you the question that I'm sure I and all our listeners are thinking? Why did this come to mind? Did this happen literally 19 years ago?
20 years ago. Well, I don't know, but I think it's great, isn't it? Like, he's just like, I'm done. And then he literally never played again. Like, he had grounded out the previous night, and that was the final at bat of one of the all-time great players. And then he just leaves. And he calls his agent, and his agent has to call his manager and be like, yo, Griffey's not coming. And he's like, why? He's never going to play baseball again. He's in an Infinity QX56 in Wyoming, and he called me and just told me he's not coming.
There's a small part of me that thinks that you've told this story in a Cars and Bids video before. And now I'm going to wait for our commenters to chime in. Please watch every video. I think it was in the 04 Rich one, but
I keep this story close to the vest. Okay. The next thing that we have to discuss is Filippo has an excellent question for the audience.
I've been thinking, because I love cheap cars. What is the cheapest car that you can buy that just gets general acceptance by car enthusiasts, right? Like a car where you don't have to defend it.
Yeah.
Like, just everybody accepts it regardless of community. It's like, oh, this is a cool car. He's an enthusiast, whatever. Cheapest
You
one.
bump into someone on the street, you ask what they're driving, it's this, and you're like,
You just
oh, I
accept
get it. And what is the cheapest? The answer, I think, is it not the NA Miata?
Yeah, well, not anymore, because NAs have gotten much more expensive than they once were.
A nice NA Miata is like 5 to 10K. Like a nice one is 5 to 10K.
I don't think that's true, because the Boxsters, when he did the Boxster video many years, not many years ago, but last year.
Back down. NA Miata, I think maybe it doesn't have excuses, but I feel like you kind of have an excuse. I don't know.
I disagree completely.
I don't disagree with NA Miata or NB Miata, which is the same price, if not a little bit cheaper. My head went to GTI of any generation, which is an $8,000 car now.
Yeah, GTI. I don't agree with that entirely, though. I think a lot of GTI owners aren't car enthusiasts, although that's not quite the question you're asking.
Yeah.
So that's fair. GTI is a good one. Like if I was like, oh, you have a GTI, even if they bought it for $5,000, I'd be like, oh yeah, you're a car enthusiast. That's true. That's true. What E30s are probably
E30? Yeah, was on my list.
They're not that cheap anymore.
No, they're probably like over 10 now at this point.
Any older German car to some extent might meet their requirements.
Yeah, that's true. You can buy a W126 for $4,000, and if someone said that to me, I'd be like, oh yeah, you're legit. What is like a really cheap car enthusiast car that you can just pick up? These are all pretty good ones, but it's an interesting question.
I'm also trying to think of like cheap and unreliable, which means you have to be like an enthusiast. Right. You have to be dedicated to keep it running. There are a lot of inexpensive JDM cars that are like, they're quirky and weird, and it's like, you have to like I don't know, Daihatsu Midget might be a bad example,
no, but also
if you have.
If I bumped into someone and said, what are you driving? They said a Honda Acti. You can buy one for $2,500, but that's like, I'd be like, wow, that's like a whole enthusiast car.
So I think about like, it's not cheap, but Kevin's like AutoZan that he had, like that, it wasn't a crazy expensive car, but it was like, wow, that's cool. But there are a lot of good JDM cars, I think.
There are a lot of good JDM cars.
Weird K cars, definitely. I mean, we sell some weird ones that sell for nothing, but are like interesting and enthusiasty. That might be it.
But
that
when you pull up the Cars and Coffee, do you then have to say, oh, this is my like work truck, or I bought this? I think it's
no, because I think if you pulled up in an Acti, people would be like, oh, this is cool. This is like,
and people do. I've seen them. It's cool.
Yeah. No, I think that's probably it. It's probably some sort of weird JDM import that costs $3,000 but can still get people interested. And I would be like, okay.
Fair.
I get it.
We've answered it for the people.
We've answered it for the people, but you're also welcome to provide your own answers in the comments below. Speaking of your own answers, Ken encountered an unusual Ferrari that he'd like to tell us about.
So I was at Car Week, and a couple of podcasts ago, we talked about this 355 that was modified by a company called Evoluto. They took a 355 and basically resto-modded it was the idea. And boy, did they. They had Ian Callum do the design work on it. which, in my opinion, not his finest work. Because the 355 is one of the most beautiful cars the company, mass-produced Ferraris the company's ever made. The standard production cars, not counting the 288 GTO or the 250 GTO, like standard production cars that they've made.
Yeah,
and they really messed with the design on this car. But anyway, I'm walking down Ocean Avenue, and there it is, that exact car, the blue one that's in all the press pictures. And I walk up, and I'm starting to look over it, and I'm sort of talking to my friends about 355 things, and one of the guys comes up to me from the company and says that I'm start talking to him, and he's like, "You clearly know this car, or I've owned one." I'm like, "Boy, you don't know who you're talking to." "Yeah, I have." And so he's like, "Well, you probably want to talk to our head, like the person who headed the project, who happened to be there." This guy walks over, and he's wearing these sunglasses with like chicken wire on the side, so it really looked like a designer. And so I got into it with him. I grilled him for a solid 20 minutes about the car, and I asked a lot of genuine questions that I was curious about. So one of the questions I asked was, let's talk about the engine, because one of the things is they proclaimed that they did all of these improvements to the car to make it more reliable, which is fair. They did some work to the cylinder head to make it more reliable and these sort of things. But the big one he said was, well, the big thing we did was the wiring harness. We made it so it's like an airplane collector. So you disconnect it and the engine comes out. It saves 2 hours of labor on the engine out service. And I went, so you do still have to take it out for belts. It's still something you have to do. He's like, yes. And I said, well, why didn't you did you consider developing a timing chain system for the car? And he said it was far too expensive. And so instead they decided to spend all this money redesigning everything else for the car, but not the biggest Achilles heel known to everybody about the 355. And he said, people keep asking me that question. He was so perplexed at why. It's like, because that's what it's known for, in addition to catching on fire. And so
did you ask him if he stopped it from catching on fire? Let me ask you this, Kenan.
No, you could tell. It's got the fuel block thing. You can tell by looking at it. But yeah.
Let me ask you this, Kenan, and I think I'm asking this question on behalf of everybody, including Filippo. What's the problem with the belt's there?
They're against the fire.
Just make it a chain. When you replace the belt, instead of putting in a belt, right? The engine's out. You put in a chain. You put it. It's
more complex than that.
Necklaces that people wear. Put in one of those.
It's more complex because you need tensioners are hard to develop for that, and then the actual system itself is hard to develop. Then there's oiling that goes into it as well, and there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just slapping a chain on there, and it's not like a salad where you can put more olive oil on it. That's not how it works, Doug. It's very complex. I understand it, but that is where the money should have gone. But I got into it even more than that, and I asked him can
I suggest that maybe there's not all that much money involved?
Well, I agree, especially considering they're only going to build 30 of these. Thank God, they're only going to ruin 30 355s. But I asked him about the styling.
I bet you $1,000 that they don't make 30 of them.
I'm hoping not, but I asked him about the styling. So the front end has these vents on the hood, completely ruin the look of the car. And I asked him, so what are those? And he said, completely aesthetic. They don't do anything. They're just there. I'm like, go off to a good start. And then so I asked him about the rear vents on the car, which are these slats like on the 288 GTO, kind of near the rear haunch. And he said, those alleviate, I think he said 13% of the negative air pressure built by the spinning of the wheel. And I'm like, okay, so at least they do something. But I was just, I asked, so why did Ian Callum do this? He wasn't involved with the car originally. Why did he do this? And they said, well, he was available. We could get him. So they paid him money, and that's why he did it.
To be fair, Ian Callum's a big name,
He's a big name. Yeah, I get it.
If Gordon Murray was available, but he was.
There are two more points I want to make on this, and then we'll move on. But I asked the guy, so what other projects have you worked on? And the guy was like, well, I worked on the Range Rover Evoque Cabriolet. Was one of the ones.
What a dream.
So great aesthetic choices. And then he said he worked for Gunterworks previously. And I'm like, now it makes sense. And the last thing I asked was, so what is the purpose of this? who are you looking for who's going to buy these cars? And they said, we really want to get, someone who has a collection of cars. And maybe they have modern hypercars, but they really want, an analog driving experience with a great looking car and a great sound. And I said, so you mean like the original? And he went, exactly. And so it's just leave it alone.
I will say, I agree with you in this particular case, but I do see a market for a modernized and improved. And you're seeing a lot of these. There's that Diablo one. There's this. There's the Turismo 0550. There's a lot of these because Singer has been so successful. Yep. There's a lot of these companies coming out to try to do this.
I see, but my opinion, the thing that all of those companies, maybe with the exception of Singer, lack is restraint. The car did not need to be restyled. It was beautiful. That's the appeal. What you need to do is take the car, fix the mechanical problems that make it inconvenient to live with, and don't touch anything else. Leave it alone.
I don't entirely agree with that. I think one thing Singer does well is they make, and I'm not a Singer guy, but they make the interior like a very, they made
it nicer.
They do, restraint is what they do. You're exactly right. If some person that we know saw a Singer if Emily saw a Singer on the street, she wouldn't have any idea that it's anything other than a regular Porsche. And that's kind of the cool thing about it. But like everything is made beautiful. It's also what beautiful. Icon does so well, honestly, with the FJ40s. Yeah. Like those FJ40s don't look that different from an original FJ40, but like they make it better in every way. And this 355 and that Diablo thing, it's a little.
There's some beautiful aspects they did to this car. Like there's some very good attention to detail on the interior that they did, but in general, too much. Way too much. Missed the mark, and I suspect they said that you have to send them your car to have this done, and can't imagine too many people will.
Well, and that's also a mistake. The Singer does it the right way. The problem is it's hard to do it the right way. Yeah. Singer now has an engine builder. They don't even use the Porsche engines. And of course, Cosworth is the engine builder. It doesn't have to be.
Well, they used to have Pink Racing used to build their engines also. But
the point is the right way to do it is they buy the 355, they perfect it, and then they sell it.
Agreed.
Not like you send it to someone for like a conversion that's really just some cosmetic modification. I mean, that's how the market's going to treat it. And so the Singer cars are special because of the level they go to. Now, it's very difficult to do that, and it's very difficult to get to a point where you can charge $2.5 million. But that's kind of the point. Like those guys are there because of the work they've done early on and the reputation they've established, and the Ian Callum 355 thing is not.
And my final point on this is like Ferrari is a hard brand to do that with to begin with. Ferrari's people don't like their cars being modified in any way, and so like it's a hard sell. I think the last thing I said was I told the guy I can't agree with your aesthetic choices. I wish you the best of luck, and so bon chance.
Damn, I think it's ugly. Good luck. See you later. And then he walked up Ocean Avenue.
Well, I went and looked at an F40 that was 2 cars down, not modified. So,
giving him some free media. All publicity is good publicity, right?
All publicity is good publicity. Maybe people do it with F1s. Filippo, talk to us about wheels.
Yeah. I was getting dinner the other day, and a Kia EV9 drove by.
Yep.
And that car has the wildest base wheels that I've ever seen.
Considering that it's just a regular old family SUV.
A regular family SUV. I want to find a different photo, but this is, I believe, the actual
that is
EV9
so
wheel.
intense.
Like, imagine if Toyota put that on the Highlander.
Like that is the wheel that you drive around it.
Yeah, imagine if the Honda Pilot had that wheel.
Like, why are we not talking more about EV wheel designs? I don't care about wheels.
Crazy.
Like Doug does, as a general rule. And like, I love what manufacturers are doing because it's just so insane.
It's so insane. So the reason why, obviously.
Usually for the aerodynamics and like the wheel design helps and keep there, whatever.
Drag
right. So there's not, you can't put holes in the wheels and get away with it because apparently there's a real aero benefit in making the wheels completely like a flat surface. And so the automakers are trying to figure out, okay, how to do that the best. I actually think of all the things that my Mercedes E450 All-Terrain does well, that's one of the very best. The wheel basically has very few holes in it. Yeah, it's back there. If you look closely, the inside parts, which look like spokes, are actually black painted. But they've just made it look like a normal wheel. But the EV9 is wild. I totally agree. And all other EVs too. There's so many, like an EV, which is kind of a normal car in a lot of ways, but they're like going crazy on wheels that look like concept cars. The Taycan is another great example. The Taycan Turbo S is that crazy, but there's a ton of them. Ioniq 5, all these cars.
It's just so cool.
I think it's cool.
It's so interesting. And like the EV9 is not that stand out of a car. Like you see one drive by that's just a normal 3-row SUV.
Normal car. You could never get away with it on any gas-powered 3-row SUV. You could never do it on the Explorer. You could never do it on a Highlander.
And I'm not sure they're going to do well, right? Like, are people going to choose these wheels if they're not already the dealer lot? Probably not. But who cares?
Well, every wheel on that car is insane. That's kind of the point. There's not like a rational wheel on the EV9.
I got to see how many steps I got to go through to choose a wheel.
They're all crazy though. Ooh, that one you just have a roof.
I mean, like, look at that. That is just the base wheel that they advertise. What
do you think about that EV9? You like that car?
I saw multiple in Italy, which I thought was wild. They were
Really?
They were all from the UK or the Netherlands, but I thought it was quite notable.
What do you think about it? Do you like it? You buy one?
I think about which EVs I could buy, and we drive a legitimate 400-ish miles frequently, and it's from sea level up to a mile of elevation for my in-laws. The only car that could do it is a Lucid Air, the top trim, highest range Lucid Air. The moment that other EVs can do 500 miles at 90,
I don't think they will. This isn't something that EV manufacturers are like trying to improve upon. They've kind of decided that 300 to 350 is like a max, and like there's no goal to get a car to do 2,000 miles. You know what I find to be so funny and very annoying? I do this drive cross country, and it's fairly common that I'll do over 1,000 miles in a day. And when you say that, people are like, you don't need to do that many miles. You just do 300, 400, and then you need like an hour rest anyway. And it's like, I do not need an hour rest after doing 300 miles. That's like 4 hours on the road. It's insane. But that's what EV people are always saying. Like, oh, a Tesla you can do a road trip in a Tesla because you end up needing a rest after the range. No, what? What are you talking about?
One of the interesting things about, like, I saw EV9s in Europe, and like Amsterdam to Milan is, maybe, I don't know, it's bad. It's 1,000 kilometers, so call that 600 miles.
600 miles.
You need to stop once to do that. Yeah. Just in the US, if you're taking real road trips, the distance is so long that it becomes a little problematic.
Yeah, it does. And that's why I'm dude, it's so funny. I mean, I'm an EV supporter. I'm having an electric charger installed at my house. I love the EVs. I have 2 hybrids myself, but
2-ish.
I didn't see a single EV. I got on the road and drove from San Diego to Massachusetts. I didn't see a single EV between the San Diego suburbs and Washington, D.C. Not one. Yep. You see a Tesla like on a trailer occasionally, and you're like, yeah.
It is the perfect second car. Like, to be honest, I don't need my Fiat 500 Abarth. Like, I could just have an EV, but I drive it so little, it doesn't matter for me. And I'm sure you eventually, Doug, your other car that isn't a Sequoia might be a EV eventually.
Only when Mercedes makes a Mercedes-Benz, I want to highlight Carl Benz, the founder of this company 150 years ago. Only when Mercedes, shout out to Carl and Bertha. Only when Mercedes-Benz makes a fully electric E-Class station wagon. When will that be?
Mercedes-Benz PR people, get in touch with us and tell us.
Get in touch. We're ready. Kenan and I are ready.
Unfortunately, we really hope that it does not look like an EQE, which is the real issue.
I would buy it even if it did. EQE is a heinous car, but it's great. It's like great to drive.
You would buy a Mercedes EQE 450 all-terrain or whatever.
If there was an EQE wagon, I would buy that. Yes. I would. I'm dead serious. And I'm not one of these like, I would buy it if Toyota made a brown manual Scion XB. No, I would legitimately purchase it as my next vehicle. I'm dead serious. I'm going to buy the new E-Class wagon. I'm going to do that.
But I would the M5 Touring too,
I do
though.
seem to recall there being conversation.
No, I did not say about the M5 Touring. I said about the M3 Touring, which they did not bring here.
You're in the clear. The M5.
Rewind the tape.
You're in the clear.
I'll play it back for you. I know. I can tell you where we were sitting. I can take.
By the way, I would buy an i5 Touring, but they're not bringing it.
What a shame.
At least this time we have it recorded on podcast, so we can reference it back if they ever do.
Come at me, bro. I drove the i5 for a video. Filippo was in it many times, and I had it for a week, and it felt like a month, and it was the greatest car that I've ever. It was so great, and I Filippo, you were in it, and you loved it, and you felt like the cloud driving experience like I did. It was like
I've never been in an i5.
Well,
the only modern BMW that I've been in, fun fact, is when I visited San Diego before moving here 4 years ago, and Kenan drove me around in an M5 CS.
I'll tell you something, you're not missing much.
Oh, you were there. That's right.
You never been in an X7?
No. I would love an X7 though. I have dreams of moving to like Vermont and buying an X7.
You can get them cheap now. Aren't they probably in the 30s?
I only buy hybrids, sorry.
Same. The Sequoia's down in the 17s for fuel economy again.
I'm surprised it's that good.
Got a lot of work to do. Here's a question for everybody. Speaking of the Talk Cars segment, the Sequoia has a maintenance required light has popped up, like the annual oil change, or whatever, because it's about to hit 5,000 miles. So I guess you have to do an oil change every 5,000 miles. Well, that's a problem for me because I plan to drive it 3,000 miles like in a couple weeks, So what do I do? Do I just not?
Won't the dealer there do an oil change for you, or a different shop? I mean, it's a
No.
really.
Yeah, so assume that's out of the question. So then what? What do you think I should do?
In an ideal world, you would stop early in your trip and get an oil change.
I'm not going to spend like a half day at a dealership in
organize it.
Pennsylvania.
It'll take them 20 minutes. Go to Jiffy Lube.
Well, it's probably more than an oil change. They probably got to do a cabin filter. They probably got to do a tire rotation.
5,000 miles. It is just an oil and a filter change.
They probably got to do a tire rotation. No, wait, I got more. They probably got to do
Doug, the tires rotate every time you drive. You're good.
They probably got to do
BMW
the
doesn't
wiper
require this much
blades.
service.
They probably got to do the wiper blades. They probably got to do.
You should do an oil change, though. You should.
Why?
You should.
Kenan, tell me what you think.
For a
I want
long
to get
time,
a answer.
manufacturers
I'm-
requested an oil change like after a break-in period.
Kenan,
and that's
it'll be
kinda gone.
They don't do that They don't do that
would do
anymore.
it.
Although they should. I absolutely would. Like after 1,000 miles is when the oil first should have been changed, when all the bearings have worn in and all that stuff. So like that's when you should have done it.
Kenan, I'm not driving a 1950s Ferrari
Yeah,
that
you're driving
Enzo
a car
built
that-
by
It doesn't
where
matter.
they've
It's a new
recalled a
engine.
bunch of
Drunk
It's a
tons of
new engine.
For engine
The
issues.
You're out
engine
of
breaks
your
in.
mind. 1,000
No.
miles, you do an oil change so the bearing
No,
can set.
not every 1,000. The first 1,000 you do it
I
after the
know.
engine's broken in. Then after that, it's like 7,000 miles or so.
That
I mean,
is the
reasonable.
most insane advice I've been given that we're not in 1957. 1,000
I don't
miles.
think the first for a brand new internal combustion car. Absolutely.
The bearings don't set anymore. This is the
Yeah, they do.
tolerances and the standards these engines are built. You don't have to do an oil change after 1,000 miles so the bearings can set. What do you think? I'm driving a Hupmobile?
You should get an oil change in Boston or thereabouts before coming back.
Why? What's the interval? 5?
Probably 10, I assume.
Oh, well, then I'm
synthetic.
good. I'm not even at
no,
5.
No,
I'm
no,
all
the
set.
first
Okay.
one's different. And also,
Right.
your life is the worst. The one downside to hybrids is I suspect they have a harder engine life because there's a lot more cold turning on. There's
Turning off,
especially
yeah.
when you're in an island that's 17 miles wide.
Two
Heat
drawbacks
cycles.
for you, two little problems for your little problematicness. Number one, most of the miles have been at 2,000 RPM just sitting on the freeway. Don't forget about that. And number two,
Which is not great.
no, that's perfect for it. And number two, don't forget, Toyota recalled all these engines because they've been blowing up, but they weren't the hybrids. They were the gassies.
Good point. I think you should still get an oil change. Just
Might as
schedule
well.
it, and then you're there for an hour. It's fine. And then you get
What
to
does
look
that
at the
mean
new
to you? You ever
Camry.
go to a deal? You can't do an oil change at a dealership in an hour? Are you out of your mind?
You call them up nicely, and it's like an off day. They'll do it in an hour.
Wait, I gotta
He's
be
not going to be
nice, too?
inconvenienced by this.
You do have to be nice.
He won't.
But Doug, you can then walk around their dealership and look at the new Corolla and the new Camry and the,
The
new
only
RAV4
thing,
Prime.
the only thing at the dealership will be a 84 BZ4Xs. That's all that will be there.
And you can admire those beautiful automobiles.
You know what? As the first person in America to drive the new Camry, I'm not that excited about it. I want to drive I just want to go home in Mexico.
Maybe it'll be a combo Lexus dealer, and then you can look at the RZ450H. Very different automobile.
That is a better car.
Yeah.
I could be what you're suggesting. I obviously won't. It would be cool to have the Carfax hit, and people be like, well, I don't understand. And I'll be like, yeah.
That would be.
I'm also a little anxious. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a little bit anxious about the fact that I'm going to try to take it to a dealer in San Diego because I didn't buy it there. And in my experience, when you have a new car, you guys are nuts. Well, you guys have never experienced this because you've never bought a new car. When you have a new car and you try to get service done at a dealership where you didn't buy it, they're like, who are you? And it's like, oh, I'm a guy who,
Yeah. You're a guy who
we know
wants
you
your car to
already?
be serviced.
No, I bought it from the Toyota dealer up in Long Beach.
No,
Why did you do that?
What
And then
they
it's
will
like,
actually say is, I understand because we've gotten one Sequoia TRD Pro allocation in the
No, dude,
last 2
I
years.
had to fight with I'm not going to name the place or the anything, but I had to fight with a Mercedes dealership about my AMG wagon one time. This is years ago. And they were like, yeah, you didn't buy it, so we're not going to give you a loaner. And I'm like, how many you got in the showroom? Like, I'm not exactly thinking you got like a big inventory of these bad boys over here. And then they gave me a CLA with halogens.
That's a dream.
Well,
Their most high demand young professional automobile, the CLA.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point, Filippo.
Thank you.
Speaking of high demand young professionals, Filippo, tell us about your current situation with your 500 Abarth.
Yeah, so I have the CL500 Barth Cabriolet. It's parked right there in front of a Ford GT and a station wagon. I've had it for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I drive it, I can't decide whether I like it a lot or I'm really tired of it. Like I just vacillate rapidly. The other day, I had dinner with our producer, Sean, like a little bit away from my house. And then I had a wonderful drive home because it was late at night and there was nobody on the roads, and you do some highway on-ramps and the convertible top is down and you do some twisty roads, and it was wonderful. But the entire time, it was like legitimately very pleasant. But then the entire time I'm thinking like, oh, this would be way better in anything else. And it was a little bit like, I'm just so torn.
Doesn't sound like you're torn.
Would it be better in a
No, I
C7
should
Corvette,
sell it.
Filippo?
I do want a C7 Corvette. I am also now considering C6 Corvettes because they're cheaper. And I'm also considering 997 911s. And
Oh, he's on tilt. Anything. It all sounds good to him.
Anybody who's watched this podcast, this is the 24th episode of this podcast. In about 18 episodes, Filippo has been like, I'm thinking about getting an Idera Commendatore. I'm thinking about getting a zoo. I'm thinking like it's what he says and is. A zoo would be cool. We'd have to.
yeah, it would be cool.
No, he's been relatively consistent about C7.
But he's never done it, dude. Let me tell you something.
It's expensive. It would be the most money I've ever spent on a car, even for the cheapest one.
Okay, well then just why don't you wait until it's fully depreciated in 75 years and then you'll be in good
The
shape.
real issue is that C6s aren't that much cheaper. It's really a shame.
Get a C5. Be the man you want to be.
But C5s are not as cheap as they once were.
Get a tip-based C5. I bet you can pick one up for $9.
Also, there are no nice C5s left that aren't Z06s, and there's a Z06 that I really want that's live right now in Cars and Bids, but I'm not going to spend 20 something.
I totally disagree with you saying there are no nice C5s left that aren't Z06s. We sell a lot of
expensive
C5s.
and aren't no that are cheap enough to justify the C5 for me.
C5s were preserved by Corvette people. There are a lot of nice ones.
They're all automatics, which is other issue.
No, they're sticks. Go pull up the thing. I'm looking at one right now. Pull up the thing. You know the thing? Pull it up. The site, carsandbids.com.
Manuel, I only want the coupe.
Type in C5 Corvette. No, I've got a specific one for you. It's a 99 Roadster.
Fine. I'll undo my coupe filter. The 99 Roadster.
Coupe? You live in San Diego. Ken, tell him.
The coupe is a
Convertible,
hatchback,
Sigma.
man. I need a hatchback.
For what?
That one on the right. That one on the right. That red one. Click on that.
That was nice. That's fair.
That's a 10 grand car. It's
I came very close to bidding on this. There was some known flaw that turned me off from it.
Oh yeah, the known flaw that it's too good. Click on the rear photo. It even has a Protect Our Fossils license plate.
Yes.
Nice. What a Colorado plate. I do like the C5. I don't know. It's not.
That's it. You just like the C5.
I don't like it enough.
Maybe we'll get one of those. Filippo's not going to get anything. He's over here.
A different car. That's what this.
You need a car with torque. You need a car with.
You know what the problem is, Kenan? He can't decide whether he likes his 500 Abarth or not, let alone what else he wants to get. He doesn't know anything. Someday I vacillate between loving my 500 and hating it.
I do.
Then I want a C5 and a C6 and a C7. He's got no idea what's going on in the world.
I like the Fiat. I drive the couple miles to work. I take it around town. It's perfect for that. Easy. It fits in any spot because it's tiny. Fits in my driveway, which is really short. My wife likes it, although she rarely drives it. So like, what's the point? There's a lot of thoughts in my head about it.
Well, Filippo, I'm going to tell you right now, there's a lot of thoughts in your head about a lot of things. You don't know what to do. You don't know what to buy. You don't know what to sell.
Came up to me and said, hey, I will trade you for X car, even if there's like a little bit differential and I'll pay a little bit, I would do it.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
But I don't want to spend $30K on a car.
You're so in every direction that it's a matter of like what is easy and convenient, and then you would just kind of do it.
If somebody were selling something at the end of my block that was cool,
that's all it would take.
That's all it would take.
Kenan and I are focused, serious people. We focus on
a list.
things.
I have a list, and I'm just waiting for the car to come up.
17 different cars in the last 6 months too.
I have a list. I was developing the list, and I have it now.
I am the only one who's been consistent. Now, on that subject, we move on to the market report, which is brought to you by Cars and Bids. Cars and Bids, which is the finest place to buy or sell an automobile, enthusiast automobile from the modern era on the worldwide internet. You can buy cars, you can sell cars, and if you sell them, listings are free. Is there anything else, Filippo, that I missed?
Anything else?
That I think that's a great summary. You can also check out all of the great content that Cars and Bids is doing on the Cars and Bids YouTube page or on Doug DeMira's YouTube page.
I love our YouTube channel so much. It's my favorite thing on the internet.
Yep.
Okay, there's a couple of market report topics I'd like to discuss. Kenan, why don't you start?
Okay, so I have noticed that, obviously the market has changed on a lot of cars recently, but one that seems to do very well, and particularly on our side still, is nicely modified BMW wagons. We still do very well with them. And in particular, the one that comes to mind for me is this 2003, I believe it was Imola Red, if memory serves me, or Japan Red, excuse me, E46 Touring. Now, what's cool about this one is that it's basically, it was started life as a 325 and now it's a 330. So it's got the larger engine and it's got the ZHP engine specifically, which came with the upgraded camshafts and all that stuff. Yep. And it's got a 6-speed manual transmission. So great color, manual, good engine. Yep. The best wheels I think BMW ever put on the normal 3 Series.
Yep.
I just really love that car. And it brought the money, $36,330 for a car with 174,000 miles shown on the odometer. It's like, strong. I mean, but it goes to show, like, this one, although it's modified, yes, great use of restraint. A lot of people go and like slam these cars, put aftermarket wheels on them. I've seen a lot of E46 M3 Tourings done that way. Not this car. It looks like the way BMW would have done it.
Totally.
Yep.
And it brought the money.
Beautiful build, and it brought the money. That's such a great point. It makes me so sad when people put an S54 into a wagon or a sedan, and then they just can't stop themselves from modding it like an M3 guy would mod it, and then they lower it and put on some front lip spoiler. It's like maybe you're trying to be as correct as possible. It's
well,
like
we had an E30
poorly.
Totally. We have an E39 M5 Touring that was exactly that. It's like, it was wheels away. Yeah. It was that close. It was so close.
I know. I think about it all the time. This car was the perfect example, and it rings the bell. And I think that's generally true. If you mod a car into a way that, like, something the factory should have done and didn't, and you do it really well, there is a market for that.
Yep, absolutely. And that car really proves it, because a normal E46 Touring is not a particularly expensive car, especially with 174,000 miles, but like done nicely like that, like bravo, and I'm very happy it performed well. And I'm not surprised it performed well with us, because those are the kind of cars our audience really loves. And I do too. I think it is so damn cool.
Well, on the other hand, you have a fantastic list of cars that you don't think will ever appreciate that I deeply agree with.
So here are some cars that I've been thinking about recently that I just don't think are going to go up in value. You mentioned a couple weeks ago W123 and like W124 are not going to go up. I think these are in a pretty similar vein. So the ones that come to mind, like R107 comes to mind immediately for me. Yep. Now they made a lot of these.
The S-Class that was, or the SL that was sold from like early 80s to like 90.
I think late 70s to through the 80s. Yeah, you have been you've said that you don't particularly like these cars to begin with, and they are known for being a little bit more difficult to take care of, but their prices are very consistent, and they made a ton of them.
It's so many.
I just don't think, unlike the Pagoda that came before it, which is a very valuable car now, it's like they made a lot more of these, and for a very long period of time, I just don't think they're ever going to go up in value.
Totally agree. And you know what the thing is? Everybody's like, well, the Pagoda, the Goldwing went up, and the 190 SL went up, and the Pagoda went up, so this is the next one to go up. Well, I bet they made more of these than all of those combined times 5. Yeah. And also, like, it doesn't necessarily mean, like, that's not necessarily how it works. It doesn't
rise. It doesn't just rise due to time. Like, that's not how. It's not
like these cars are immensely available in the top trim level, 560 SL, in nice shape because people preserved them, and these cars lasted forever. Like you said, like late 70s, early 80s, all the way through like 89. Like, there's decades of nice ones. It's just And
it's not
and by the way, I've been hearing. Truly, for 15 years. The next year is the R107's year. It's finally going to happen. Meanwhile, they're not even keeping pace with inflation. We're still selling them for $8,000.
Right. So speaking of another car,
I don't actually think it's a bad car. I just don't think it's going to be something that shoots up in value.
Like the nicest ones are worth the mid 30s. I think you can find we haven't hosted like a super low mile one, but the really nice ones are in 50s, whatever. But they're not increasing, that's for sure. And
they're not. A cheap Pagoda is probably a 50s, 60s car, and a cheap Gullwing, Canon will pick one up for $800,000-$900,000.
And $950,000. But yeah. So point with that car, drive it, enjoy it. Another car that's in the similar vein for me,
if you don't own one right
Porsche 928 is another car that comes to mind. Like, I just don't think they're ever going to go up. Now there are some like ones that we've sold that are interesting. Like Kimbala one was kind of fascinating. I think we sold like a crazy low mileage one too. But and like they made the really late, S4s in the 90s.
The GTS was the one that is the most desirable. And those I think will appreciate and are very cool. And honestly, I drove one. I thought it was amazing. But I generally agree with your point here. And frankly, it's the exact same reason and the exact same era. They made 1 billion of them. They made them at the same time as those SLs. Yep. And a lot of people preserved them because they were Porsches and they were cool. And so like, they're just not that.
It's not. No, and also that car coupled to it, it has problems to take care of that are not cheap or easy. And so although air-cooled 911s have really gone off, it's a completely different thing to 944s and 928s. Yep. It's like, it's just completely different breed. And I just don't see them going up, and I don't suspect they ever will. And again, kind of in the same line, another SL, but R129, same thing, made a bazillion of them. Really special ones are different, like the SL73 or even like really nice SL600s, but like they're just like, I just don't see it's going to happen. So I see people like preserving them, and which is great. But I mean, I like just enjoy them and use them. And I think that's great for enthusiasts that like, you don't have to worry about those things like running away. If you want that car, I think you'll have a great variety of choice, which is always good. I just don't think it's going to be a collectible.
The only one that makes me sad is the R129. I love that car and I think it deserves more, but it just has never happened for it. And again, it's the exact same issue. These cars are made from like 90 or 89 through 2002. There's 15 years of well-preserved, and honestly, it was a reliable era for Mercedes-Benz. Just like the R107s, like the cars were pretty well built. And so there's not a lot of attrition. They're doing it. They're easy to find.
Agreed. We've auctioned 115, and that's just us.
And we've got 3 live right now. So almost 120 of these things we've auctioned. They're not uncommon.
No, they're great cars though. Just make sure that the top doesn't need maintenance. That's
they are great cars. I find them to be fun to drive. They're solid. They're M113 is a great powertrain. There's the V12 is a great powertrain. But even if you get like a later one that's
so
nice, they're just not all that expensive. The nicest one I think we sold, or at least the nicest V8, we sold this black. This belonged to a buddy of mine. We sold this black 2001 with only 16,000 miles. But even that only rings the bell at 27 some. It's such a nice looking car with these 5-spoke AMG wheels. You see that in there? That third result.
Yep, I see it.
And it's like, it's cool, but like, it's just, they're fairly common to find. They just are. There's always a couple of these for sale with low miles, late model year, nice shape.
Yep.
Yeah. Totally. But yeah, those are some of the other ones that I think fall into that vein. I realized 2 of those are SLs, but like nonetheless, like I was really thinking about cars like that, cars that will go up, cars that won't, cars that will stay the same. And I think that these cars fall very nicely in there, and they're all good cars.
You know what has gone down legitimately? Boring 997s.
Yeah, I know. I was looking at the other day.
Like by the way, we're not alone. I'm pulling up our results, but we're not alone in this. I, as somebody that's interested in a 997, have started looking at them more seriously. And like, this doesn't sell, but $26K for a manual, a higher mile, but a manual early S cab. All the early ones were S's.
Yes,
35.
I will say this. 36. I will say this. Totally agree with you. They had a COVID like peak, not necessarily a peak, but like they had a strong line in COVID, and things have changed. However, something I've noticed: 997 turbos have started to eclipse 991 turbos. With this for desirability, and it's the manual thing is part of it, but I do find it interesting because we saw the same thing with 993 turbos and 996 turbos. The 993s are worth a lot more than the car that came after. It's going to be the same thing again. When the history books are written on 911 turbos, the 993 turbo and the 997 turbo will stand as the most, and the 964s, but there's very few of them, will stand as the two that everybody wanted.
And probably the 5-speed 930, just because it's an icon.
Yeah,
the first one.
Yeah,
no, I agree. It just like, again, several episodes we talked about the most desirable turbos specifically, and I agree. And the manual thing really is kind of the dividing line in that. Now, of course, you get 997 with a tip, but still,
you can. Although I've noticed also that the 997.2 Turbo S's are also bringing more than 991 turbos, which is interesting because all the 997.2 Turbo S's were PDK, but they were special. And the 991 turbos were just made in much higher numbers, and they're amazing cars. They're fast. I think this is actually a good thing for a lot of car enthusiasts because they're fast, they're reliable. The 991 turbos are great cars, but the 997 turbos are definitely the more special car. And it's the same with 993 and 996. The 996 is fast and amazing and fun, etc. But the 993 is the more special car.
Totally. Oh, I can't wait till 991 Turbo S cabs can depreciate. So comfortable, and your 0 to 60 time is the same as a Veyron. Like that's pretty good.
That's exactly right. One other thing I want to talk about on the subject of market report is the Toyota Century V12. Filippo, have you paid attention to these?
You know what these V12 Centuries were relatively real money when they first became imported.
They were real money when they first became legal. Yep. Okay. Now they are free, and you should buy one of these things, dude. They're
all day. Wow.
12 to 15 grand for a V12. And unlike a lot of JDM cars, you're like, I'm not sure if I can find parts. This isn't really all that cool. I don't know. This is cool. And there's a dedicated community. No, you will find parts. James has one up in Canada.
Our friend from Throttle House.
Dude, Filippo, can you do this for me, please?
No, because I don't want a Century. But
once we sold one the other day for 15 grand. It is so cool. Look at it. Those wool seats. Filippo, imagine what you could do with those wool seats.
Live the high life for sure.
Yes.
So comfortable.
Cannon, tell him.
I'm not the right person.
So comfortable. You just need doilies on them.
You know, you have a conversation with Kenan, and he's like, "Oh, I have a phone in my M5." Well, this person has a phone and a screen and another remote.
And a screen and a remote that says Century. It's a branded remote for the car. Like, that's so cool. Kenan, get one of these.
I'm good. I'm leaving that one for Filippo. Add that to the list of your C5, C7, 911 Toyota Century.
A little different.
Maybe now we know why they are bargains. Nobody actually wants one. I think they're cool as hell. I think this car is amazingly cool for, dude, you want a cheap V12? Move aside Jaguar XJS. Here's a cheap V12 that's actually reliable.
Yeah.
No, I mean, people ask us this question. We had this question on a previous pod. What's the cheapest V12?
Here's V12.
It's a Century. It's pretty reliable.
That question was the worst. That is the extreme.
Well, and it's pretty reliable. And also, here's a thought, okay, and I'm just suggesting this, but this is a 5-liter V12. You open that puppy up, you get those headers running out the hood instead of running out the back after 38 quieting mufflers. I bet you got a little going on.
Can we talk about a different V12 for a second?
Wait, Kenan, am I wrong? Don't you think you can make this thing sound baller?
Oh, I know you could. You could probably do that. I'm sure there are people who have. I mean, like the S600 is a really good example. Like the Sacco era cars. I mean, you can make them sound like a Zonda. There's somebody who has, but I'm sure you could. I'm against modifying that car, but like you probably could make.
Yeah, but you wouldn't be against modifying a Century. There's a billion of them. They cost $14,000. You and me should buy a Century, and then with a couple of cold ones and a long weekend, we should make it sound like an F1 car because that's what it is.
Oh wow!
Because that's what it is.
Can I talk about the fact that I secretly want an S600, like a W221?
Oh God, add it to the list. But yeah, all right.
No, I'm not going to buy one.
There's no you want a Freddy S? Oh, that one. Yeah.
But like,
everybody wants
it. It's just so good, and they've gone so affordable. Now,
yeah,
not to like live
everyone
with,
wants that,
but to buy. I bid on one years ago. Years ago, I bid on one. Early on, Cars and Business.
Oh yeah, it was brown. I think.
You know what those wheels say?
Yeah.
You know what those wheels say?
Pound.
I am incredibly wealthy, and I flew private to get here. That's what those wheels say.
I should have bought this because my car is the Zigno Mocha Black. I should have bought this instead of my E-Class wagon.
Wow, you could have a pair. Okay, we have to do questions. Only a few minutes, okay? Now, remember, because we're recording this podcast a week early, these questions are from last week, but you can ask us new questions, and we will answer them. Go to carsandbids.com, click on the communities tab. There's going to be a post there where there are questions, and we will answer them in next week's pod, and we will answer the top upvoted questions no matter how bad they are. And they're usually great, including this one. Okay, I'm starting with one of my favorite questions we've ever been asked from Stainless Illusion.
Ooh.
What are your thoughts on these people that insert themselves into auctions, asking all kinds of questions, offer evaluations? I see these things that concern me. Has the time belt replaced hundreds of times? These question, and never sell, bid, or buy anything. That's a great question. From the perspective of a seller, I hate these little bastards. From the perspective of a buyer, I'm like, damn, I'm glad he asked that because I didn't know about that.
Yep.
And so that's kind of the thing about this. Like, I don't know. I will say this sort of person, the people who pop in and just ask questions and clearly are not interested, but like know the car and just want to like get at the skin of the seller. I will say sellers hate them. Real bidders, I think they just ignore them. Like people who are real about cars, I mean, unless the person uncovers something serious, which is actually probably a good thing for everybody. Real bidders like I've bought some cars at auction. I didn't read the comments. I did the diligence that I needed to. Screw that. I did the diligence that I needed to do. PPI beforehand, talk to the seller, look at all the documents, call reputable shops and figure out, like, I do the diligence and then I put in the bid and that's that. And I think that sellers shouldn't be as concerned about these people as they sometimes are. I think the best way to handle them is like reply in a very nice way, address their question, show that you are like a confident, calm, reasonable person. And I think that goes a long way, because I think a lot of people who are participating on our auction site or on Ring and Trailer or all the other ones know that like these people are there and they're annoying. And if you show as a seller that you're not rattled by them and that you have enough confidence in your car that you can handle the questions, then actually I think I think that comes out as a net positive for you. 100%. Like, oh, this dude is a good seller.
And that's true if you don't know the car that well. Like I've seen a lot of sellers where like maybe they were a dealer, they only had the car for a bit, or they were selling on behalf of somebody else. Somebody comes in the comment and asks really specific questions, and they go out and they reply say, hey, what is the photo that you need that like would show this? Let me go take that photo. And it drives a ton of confidence because you're being really transparent. And
remember, I always tell people, you're buying the seller. That when you buy a car, you're buying the seller. And if the seller, can string together a reasonable sentence with understanding the difference between it's apostrophe.
Let's not set the standards too high.
And can take great photos and like answer these types of questions, you really start to think, whether it's a private seller or a dealer, like, okay, this person does inspire confidence. And I actually think these annoying people who just ask questions can truly be a benefit for sellers in these 100%. Auctions if they handle the people well and aren't just like, because a lot of sellers get frustrated and like, you're always asking questions and you never bid and you're just a jerk. And it's like, okay, now you look like the idiot. But if you would just like handle it well, I think it would actually benefit you. That's my answer.
Agree. It's treated as a professional thing. Like be professional and courteous, and also don't get bogged down necessarily reading it like in an angry tone like Doug just did. Like that's not always how people mean it. Like you have words on a page, you have no sense of tonality for others saying it. Like you can be a genuinely interested question, but also like I think if you're like submitting a car, it's good to look through the previous comment sections of what questions the people have asked and try to get ahead of it. Like try to get ahead of taking pictures of this or get having a compression test on or whatever, just to better represent your car. Like with my 355, I knew the things it needed. It needed picture, it needed a great picture gallery, it needed all the documentation, I needed a fresh compression test, all of that, and I did all of that. And so there was very little for people to protest in the comments or even those questions they were already answered. And so like trying to knowing your car as best you can and representing it beforehand really helps. But exactly like you said, if stuff comes up, just respond, professionally as if every single person were an interested party, treat them all the same.
And totally. It's okay if you don't know the answer.
That will go a long way toward making actual interested parties feel confident in you. I really believe that. Okay, next question from IKCK. Hi, Doug and friends. Have you ever heard about the weird stuff in the China car market? I'm not just talking about Chinese manufacturers, but foreign companies have several Chinese exclusive models you would probably find interesting, like the Ford Edge L. Yeah, I think that all the Chinese market is so interesting. I follow several Chinese car market Instagrams that I'm obsessed with. They post pictures of crazy vehicles. But, China doesn't have YouTube. And it's so funny. Everybody's like, they're going to ban TikTok. How could they do that? Well, China banned YouTube. I mean, I don't know. So anyway, the point is they don't have YouTube. So I'm not really all that popular in China. There's not a lot of people like reaching out. I was actually a kid when I was in Barcelona this summer. A kid came up to me and said, I live in China. And I said, oh my God, how do you know who I am? And he said, I watch it on VPN. And I'm like, ooh, I'm not going to tell. But now I'm telling. Someone in China is watching. But anyway, so I don't know even how much interest there would be from the audience in that stuff, because there's such a separation between China and America in terms of culture and vehicles and stuff. But it is interesting to me.
The Chinese market is fascinating. Also, there's a lot of things that are pretty similar to where the U.S. market was, especially 20, 30 years ago in terms of preferences, like lots of big sedan preferences. Yeah. So recently... Less so though. The really interesting thing about the Chinese market has become completely EVs, dominated by EVs and dominated by Chinese car makers. There was a time when the foreign brands were really making massive inroads into China, and that has completely changed. The Chinese brands have a huge market share now, and it's definitely a different world than it was. And all those Chinese companies making copies of Land Rovers and stuff, that's all over. They make their own desirable cars now. I mean, it's interesting, right? Like you could say what you will for a bunch of reasons about how China approached it. But anytime a foreign manufacturer is coming in, they made generally made them do like a joint partnership with a Chinese company, and that's the result. It really jump started the Chinese products. It's also interesting to see in Europe there are a lot of brands that are Chinese brands. MG is fundamentally a Chinese brand. Geely, Lynk & Co. that are available in Europe are that. GAC, there's a bunch of others.
Volvo.
Yeah.
Hey, Filippo, did you just advocate for communism?
No.
You said it was a great idea that the government force new market partners to link up with Chinese companies.
I invited you to say what you will about it, but it was effective for this purpose.
Filippo, talk about the Corvette again. Just get some America back in there. Capitalism back.
I don't want to take away my citizenship, my U.S. citizenship. So yes, I'll talk about the Corvette.
One more question, because we are over time and Filippo's spouting communist theories. One more question from Danny LaCroix. Question for Doug: what happens on your channel if you eventually run out of cars to review? Reviewing 100 plus cars a year, I feel it's inevitably bound to happen. Automakers only make so many new cars a year. Danny, I thought the same thing, but guess what? There's a lot of cars. We're good.
Plus, I mean, we can also always do what other car YouTubers do. There are folks that have gone into reviewing strollers. Forged Auto Review, the channel reviews strollers.
No, but really, there's a lot of cars. So on my channel, I review about 60 new cars a year and about 40 cars on the site that are like used cars. I'll probably eventually run out of the old cars, but even that's taking forever. The answer is I don't have time to even get to all the new cars. Yeah. I don't. I mean, I just put up that WRX TR review and the LC500. I shot those 6 months ago. The stuff comes out so fast, it's hard to stay on top of it. And I agree with you. You would think that 100 cars videos a year, you would run out. I was terrified of that when I first started doing this, but no, I don't think I'll ever run out. They just keep coming out with more and more and more. And now we got a facelift Honda Odyssey, and I got it.
I'm excited for when you review the Kia Sedona hybrid.
I won't, but I will someday review the Honda Prologue, even though Honda won't lend me one because they know.
They know
about it. They know the truth.
They know.
Someday I'll review Honda Prologue, and I'll tell you the truth about it, which is that it has 6 lug wheels.
It's a lot of lugs.
Terrified of them falling off.
Filippo, any final thoughts before we go?
No. I'm excited for more news next week. And questions.
You did a fantastic job. This was our finest podcast of all time. Goodbye, everyone.
Short-term memory loss on Doug's part.
Goodbye.